entitled Spurring Health and Wealth Through Medical Breakthroughs. My name is David Cook. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, and I'll be the moderator for today's panel. First of all, I'd like to thank Senator Sherrod Brown and his staff for hosting this briefing and for their commitment to the area of global health. A bit of interesting timing around today's briefing. This is actually the 30th anniversary of the first description of AIDS in 5 men in Los Angeles. So 30 years ago this week was the first description by the Centers for Disease Control of the disease that later came to be known as AIDS. And tomorrow is the beginning of a very important General Assembly special session at the UN. The UN in this special session will be reviewing the world's progress in the fight against AIDS, plotting the course of that effort over the next 10 years, and ultimately trying to assess the sustainability and scale-up of current exciting treatment and prevention technologies that we've seen develop over the last decade. So it's fitting today that we're here today to talk about vaccines, because ultimately we're going to require a vaccine for HIV in particular to end the pandemic globally. But vaccines go well beyond HIV, and we're going to also be talking about other important killers, including TB and malaria. With me today is a truly distinguished panel, and I'll just take a few moments to introduce each one, and then we'll get going with questions, which I'll initiate, and then we'll have a period in which the audience can also participate. So to my far left is Michael Gerson. Michael is a nationally syndicated columnist who appears twice weekly in the Washington Post. He's the author of several books, and he serves as an advisor and board member on numerous, in fact, too numerous to mention, international organizations focused on issues such as global poverty, hunger, and the plight of refugees. From 2006 to 2009, he was the Roger Hertog Senior Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, and before joining CFR, he was a senior policy advisor and speechwriter for President George W. Bush as the assistant for policy and strategic planning. Importantly, and I think this is very notable, he was a key administration advocate for the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, which has come to be known as PEPFAR, as well as the President's Malaria Initiative. He also has been involved in the fight against global sex trafficking and funding for women's justice and empowerment issues. Pleasure to have you, Michael. The middle of the panel is John Lusingu. John has just flown in from Tanzania yesterday, where he is a principal research scientist at the National Institute for Medical Research. His primary professional focus is the epidemiology and immunity of malaria. He completed a doctorate in medicine in Tanzania in 1994 and obtained a diploma in healthcare and management in tropical diseases at the Swiss Tropical Institute in Basel in 1998. In 2000, he joined the National Institute for Medical Research, and he's been involved in malaria epidemiology studies and clinical trials of anti-malarial drugs. He's also received his PhD under a scholarship through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where he studied malaria morbidity and immunity in communities with different Plasmodium falciparum transmission intensity. He's currently a principal investigator in 2 anti-malaria vaccine trials, and I think we're going to hear about those. This is truly one of the most exciting developments in global health today. And he's the recipient of numerous grants and an author on many publications. Thank you, John. Finally, I'd like to introduce Margie McGlynn. Margie has a distinguished career in the biopharmaceutical industry, most recently as the president of Merck Vaccines, where she was at for 26 years. At Merck, she not only headed the team for vaccines, but also anti-infectives, and was responsible for a very large portfolio of products. In addition, she launched several initiatives to provide access for Merck vaccines and HIV therapies in the developing world. She served on the board and executive committee of the Gavi Alliance. Gavi is the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, a public-private partnership with a mission to bring life-saving vaccines against common infectious diseases to children throughout the developing world. She also played a major role in the formation of the Hillerman Center, which is an important vaccine research center being established in India under a collaboration between Merck and the Wellcome Trust. She currently serves on the board of the organization that I'm with, the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, as well as 3 other for-profit companies, 2 of them which are in the biopharmaceutical sector. She has worked in the area of orphan diseases and has a family foundation that funds research for a disease called homocystinuria. Thank you, Margie. So I'd actually like to start with a question that goes to your motivation individually for why you have an interest in global health. Michael, to start with you, PEPFAR is one of the most significant programs developed during the Bush administration's first term, and you were present for that and an advocate, as well as present at the signing of the President's Malaria Initiative. Both have been fantastically successful in terms of lives saved and numbers of people who have access to therapy. Tell us about your personal convictions that led you to these programs and why it has been good policy for America.
Well, we're talking about the 30th anniversary, but it's sometimes hard or easy to forget what things were like just 10 years ago. When we came into the White House, we were getting reports back from members of Congress and members of the cabinet in Africa that were seeing a humanitarian crisis like nothing they had ever seen. This was a situation where sometimes this is viewed as a disease of the poor. It was really a disease that was taking doctors and nurses and civil servants and people that made organized society possible. And so there was this profound humanitarian motivation at the beginning of this. It was not a strategic question, it was really a humanitarian issue. I remember having a friend in Lusaka, Zambia, who was doing very small-scale treatment early before PEPFAR, who sent his daughter to an English language school across town, had to leave an hour every morning to get across Lusaka because of the funeral processions that went on all day, every day. So that was part of what we were facing. Secondly, though, it fit a broader strategic framework. We were very conscious of the fact that America, and this was true of the Clinton administration, I think saw this as well, was facing a new set of threats and challenges that originated in failed states, ungoverned regions, lawless and hopeless parts of the world. And that would, that was everything from drug gangs to criminal gangs to terrorist groups to refugee flows to pandemic diseases, a variety of challenges that could arrive in America in very, in a swift fashion. So I think you had, beginning early into the 2000s, you had a confluence of both a profound humanitarian crisis and an awakening idea that America's security and future depend very much on the hope and progress of other people around the world. So I think that was the kind of the 2 major motivations.
Thank you. John, you grew up in Africa, and of course you're spending your professional life working on malaria in Tanzania. But obviously for many of your peers who've been well-trained, they've left Africa, the so-called brain drain. Tell us about why you made the choice to stay in Africa to work on malaria, and the important changes you've seen in the last decade as a result of global health movements, and what differences this has made in a place like Tanzania.
Thank you, David. Yes, I grew in Tanzania. I was born in Tanzania. I lived in Tanzania throughout my life. But there are certain times when I went to Europe for my studies. But what made me really get involved in really working only in Tanzania is that when I graduated as a medical doctor, I started working in Mbeya, which is the southern part of Tanzania near Zambia. When I was working there, I got very much frustrated. I found that when you go into the ward, when you have patients, or even in the theater, there are no sufficient equipment, and also the supplies, and also the drugs are not available. And so a lot of people who could be treated in keyword were just dying, a lot of them, and especially because of HIV/AIDS. Then I started to work a little bit in collaboration with the colleagues from Munich University, I worked a little bit in HIV/AIDS, and at the same time, Walter Reed Army Institute of Medical Research, they came to do some research in Bear. They were starting their program. Oh, I thought, let me get involved and maybe move out of Tanzania and get into green pastures where I get better pay, and also I can work comfortably. And really, when you want to prescribe something to patients, you can actually get that one. But the move was not successful. So the success was to move from a public practitioner to go into medical research. So 10 years ago, I joined the medical research. And in the process of joining the medical research, I started researching epidemiology research in Tanzania, and at the same time doing anti-malarial drug trials. Fortunately, the last decade, which ended probably last year, it came with a lot of good things. One of them was that there were more funding to make sure that research and development is something that now is being a main focus, especially in developing countries. So there was a lot of research on malaria. Then fortunately also I got myself funding to do studies on malaria, especially malaria immunology. I thought, why should I not do something that is going to help to prevent diseases in Tanzania particularly, because majority of the people who are suffering, they are from the community, from the rural area. And we believe that prevention is better than cure. So I studied immunity to malaria because of my personal history that I grew in the mountainous area of Tanzania. I was never bitten by mosquitoes. So when I was 16 years is when I got my first episode of malaria. And this was severe, not very severe, but I was admitted in the hospital. I continued getting episodes of malaria for 10 consecutive years. So for the past 20 years, I have never been suffering from malaria, even if mosquitoes bite me. Then I was questioning myself, why did I have protection against malaria myself? And doing epidemiological studies, I found that also some individuals, they have malaria parasite, but they don't develop disease. So I thought that is a good thing if I can go deeper into study that one. So I did epidemiological studies in Tanzania, and I had to transfer samples to Copenhagen, Denmark to study. But thank you to what has happened in the last decade, that more funding came into research and development. Then there was a transfer of technology into Tanzania such that we could do more research in Tanzania in the laboratory base. Outside there, I put some 3 leaflets. One showing that we have a good microbiology laboratory, we have a good clinical hematology and biochemistry, parasitology laboratory, and also the digital X-ray. So for the funding which came, which was available in Tanzania, it was much more attractive for me to go back into Tanzania when I finished my PhD in 2006 and practice my profession by doing clinical trials. And fortunately, with the partnership between Path MVI and GSK, we managed to do phase 2B malaria vaccine trial, and currently we're going on with phase 3 malaria vaccine trial.
Great, thank you, John.